So let me jump into these questions. Question number one, somebody wrote to me, what does the Bible say about cremation, if anything? I know the Jewish do not embalm very quickly within 24 hours. I believe, is there any guidance on burial? It's a really good question. And I do have some thoughts on this. And again, maybe not everybody would agree with me on this. So let me just talk about some principles and then some kind of thoughts behind those and how we apply those in our lives. Let me say this, just principle number one, it's really important we get this. I mean, our bodies, one day Jesus is going to raise them from the dead and glorify them and all of those things, but it is really important to realize that whatever we do with our bodies, you burn it, you bury it at sea, you, I don't know, send it into outer space if you want, but it is going to waste away, and in one sense, at a physical reality, the net result is the same. And I actually, the thing that, my biggest advice for anybody with funerals and all those things is don't waste money. Like, you don't need to spend thousands of dollars on some silly, gold-plated coffin to sit there and rot in the ground. And I actually, as a pastor, I find it quite offensive or hurtful when I see people at one of the most vulnerable junctures of their life, and then, some funeral home is pressuring them to, well, you've got to spend $5,000 to do this well, and you don't really love mom unless you're doing this. And I tell you guys, I would not do that. I really would not. I think it's actually really good to have a funeral, or frankly I'd call it more a celebration if it was a believer. I think it's much better to bring real people, real family, real friends around and celebrate and laugh and cry and tell a few stories and kind of honor and mark that moment. But to be honest, it doesn't cost hardly any money to do that. And I always let people use my church for free if we're in relationship with those, my cafe in my church, and a few bucks and some coffee and maybe some pastries or whatever. You don't need all that thing. Now, I'll just give you an example. When my mother died, it was 2017, now obviously, forgive me for being practical here, but you've got a dead body there, you've got to do something with it. So absolutely, I think we had my mum cremated, but my brothers and I didn't even do a funeral service. We'd made an appointment when we all could meet up about 3 or 4 months later, went to the seaside and, scattered the ashes there into the sea, a place she loved, and honored her and cried and prayed and loved. And to me, that's so much more precious. And whenever I'm in that part of Wales, I'll maybe go by there and just, as it were, just hang out and say hi and remember. My mum's not there, she's with Jesus. To be with the Lord is far better. So principle number one, I don't know what you do, earth to earth, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Principle number two, which may appear to contradict principle number one, there's actually a really important truth that I think many Christians miss here, and I don't have the time to go into this in great depth, is that God is really interested in your body. And sometimes we get this idea that in eternity future, well, we're just going to go to heaven and float around. No, we're going to have physical bodies for all of eternity. And God values your body. And there is actually a whole Christian tradition, and a good one in a sense, where in many Christian nations, like in India, people wouldn't cremate bodies and would actually bury them. And in a way, it was a way of saying this: the Lord for the body and the body for the Lord. Glorify God with your body, that your body is going to be resurrected, and it's not just unimportant. Gnosticism, probably the first major error that got into the church, or one of the first, basically taught that God's interested in your spirit, but your body, it's all finished with. And no, God's really cares for your body. The Bible talks about the Satan, as it were, trying to, it's hard to even understand this, but trying to get the body of Moses even after he was dead, and the Lord burying him. And so yeah, God cares practically for your body. Okay, let me try and get to this. I mean, what do we do with all that? I would say at a preference, if it's possible, I would actually advise people to be buried. And if I had a choice, again, none of us completely had that choice once we're no longer here, it's in somebody else's hands. But I would say the preference, my best, would be to bury a person. But I also would have no problem with cremation as well, in that here's my point. The Lord knows the circumstances. The Lord knows where we are. If we kind of buy into some doctrine that says, well, unless you're buried with a Christian burial, God won't resurrect you. Oh, really? So what about the people killed in the Twin Towers, or, you know, in some plane crash, or in a house that burnt down, or, you know, hundreds of thousands of people lost at sea, or whatever? Let's not create some weird, wacky rule in that. So I would say my preference would be to advise somebody to be buried if possible. But if that were financially out of the question, or even practically in some nations, that's hard to do, I would also have no problem in cremation. And I think the Lord knows our hearts, and we should obviously want to honor the wish of the person. But what we should be doing, whatever we're doing, is recognizing, hey, that body, that dead body at the time, that's not the person. That's like the person's tent, that's the person's envelope, that's the person's earth suit. And that person, you know, is more alive than you'll ever be. Is completely alive, is with God, assuming they were a believer. And while we want to honor and thank them, we're not going to worship those things. Lastly, really important we get this, I wouldn't get into condemnation or legalism or some weird, you know, fetish thing around that. So that will be my thought about that. Boom.